session for RT2 for day 3. With us today, we have Fernando Hoces de la Guardia, who's a project scientist at BITSS, also affiliated with the Berkeley Institute for Data Science, BITSS, just like Sierra. And his work at BITSS focuses on computational reproducibility, but also promoting the principles of open science in the domain of policy analysis, using this novel approach called open policy analysis. And this is exactly what he'll be talking about in his talk today. Fernando, take it off.
Thank you, Alex. And thank you for sticking with me till the end of today. I'm glad that this talk fit in this day, because I think it's very well aligned to the themes that Sierra was talking, what we just covered on our workshop. But the broad perspective is how to bring transparency and reproducibility to policy analysis. And policy analysis here, unlike research, is not in charge of generating novel knowledge. It's about using previous knowledge, doing analysis, and contextualizing it to answer a prospective policy debate. So when talking about a future healthcare reform, a future variation in the minimum wage, tax reform, etc., research will tell you what happened in the past. Most of the time, there's some prospective research, but policy analysis would be about, given what we know from the past, what can we say about a specific future reform? So the main motivation for me and for us in BITSS, I hope it's about using open policy analysis as a way of fighting the rise of alternative facts. Here on the left, we have something that there's consensus in the horror that it generated, and generated the rise of the term alternative facts, when previous government officials claimed that the crowds who were in the right here were larger or equal, I don't remember, than the crowds that were here. And that was a fact that was a claim that it was easily disproven by a simple picture, but then some government officials start claiming that people can have alternative facts, and there was a common horror in this idea that people can common alarm across the political, hopefully across the political ideologies, that people should not have their own facts. And so here on the left, we have some sort of agreement that this is wrong. On the right, we have something far less, there's far less consensus in being alarmed behind it. And I am alarmed by it. Some other people are, but this is the idea that for a long time, and this is has nothing to do with the left or the right, for a long time, it has been common for decision makers, for policymakers to cite different reports, different analysis, estimating the same sort of key policy estimate, and claiming that the costs and benefits are basically suit their political inclinations. And this is, again, this is I see it as equivalent, the left and the right here, in the sense that when policymakers disagree on what policy analysis to use, they're essentially, one is saying something like 2 + 2 is 3, the other one is saying something like 2 + 2 is 5, and I found that equally outrageous, that we should be alarmed by people disagreeing on basic things. So here I have two examples, one from a US senator from the right disagreeing with an interviewer, that basically the interviewer is saying, we have looked about what economists are saying regarding the effect of unemployment insurance, and there's no measurable effect. And the senator is saying, I don't know which economists you're talking to about, but there is. And again, this is we have become accustomed to allowing this type of disagreement at the policy level. At the research level, it's totally fine. Like, we can disagree and fight as to what's the best specifications, what's the best method, etc., etc. But once we move it to the policy analysis stage, it should be, ideally, we should all be using at the same report. And if not, we should be able to pin down exactly where the difference is. And here's another example from a senator from the left, again, saying something similar along the lines of there's not a single study out there that suggests that his proposed healthcare reform is far less expensive than the status quo. So that's the motivation. We wanna move closer to policy analysts agreeing on what's the best representation of the facts, and for that, basically, we're seeing similarities with the open science movement. First of all, this idea that policy analysis is opaque, and there's this multiplicity of reports out there. Has been observed before in economics by Charles Mansky, where he talks about this idea of incredible certitudes, or in political science by Wesselnick and co-authors, where they document how people would arrive to a table with report wars, like each throwing at each other their own report. And again, these are reports that are meant to estimate the same policy estimate, the same key quantity, and it should be like 4 or like a something very close to a fact. And the one mechanism to this divergence in reports, I suggest, is that low credibility of policy analysis, it leads to the credibility as opposed to being based on the quality of the analysis. Remember this Mertonian norm of universalism, that we should not care who says what. Like the policy analysis is the exact opposite. It really matters who's the serious analyst who's doing the analysis. And the key problem is that the assignment of reputation, the assignment of seriousness varies across political positions. Somebody on the right might think that think tank X is more serious or credible than think tank Y. And we have written about it and documented some parallels that this might have with the reproducibility crisis in open science. Basically, we propose 2 core principles for open policy analysis, 3 core principles for open policy analysis: the idea of having open output, open analysis, and open materials. That means nothing till now, but I'll show it to you in a second. We also propose an agenda to implement and document how open policy analysis can be applied into several policy issues. In this presentation, I will be reviewing a open policy analysis project on mass deworming interventions. So there has been a long line of research on mass deworming interventions. There has been some policy analysis that coming out of that research, and we have worked to make those policy analysis a prototype of an open policy analysis. So just to put you a little bit, give you a little bit of context, deworming interventions try to tackle parasitic worm infections that are endemic in many countries. Disproportionately, they affect the poor. They basically affect with regular bodily processes. They affect human health, education outcomes, and long-term economic well-being. And mass deworming as a policy intervention at a school level has been proposed as a cost-effective approach to tackle this problem. Most of the deworming literature stems out of a specific study that was conducted 20 years ago in Kenya, where there were very high prevalence rates of worm infections, where the costs of deworming were very low. The length of treatment was a specific quantity that varies nowadays across settings. And nowadays, those results from the past are used to inform whether or not future policies around deworming should be implemented in different settings. The key point here is that different settings have different prevalence rates, have different implementation costs, and have different length of treatments. On top of that, convenient for us as this idea that open policy analysis, we think it's a good lays out a good foundation to minimize this divergence of how to of writing different reports or alluding to different facts. There has been a strong debate around the research of deworming based on some of a reanalysis from Aiken et al. And this type of debate where there's a initial result, then there's a reanalysis that the challenge a little bit of those debates can be seen in multiple settings: minimum wage, immigration, taxation, etc., etc. And the key point that I want to stress out is that open policy analysis is not going to resolve those debates, but it's going to prevent this, going back to what we were talking about, like forking into different paths where people start citing totally different reports. They might, we want them to move ideally into one scenario where everybody cites the same policy estimate, but if not, move them to a scenario where somebody can easily say, okay, we disagree in this number, and if we change this number, we're going to be in agreement. So the framework, it's this fairly basic idea that we want to move away from a report that has like a one-dimension report where we have a PDF or a printed report. In the best case scenario, sometimes this analysis goes like as a one line into a law or into a regulation, but we want to move from that into a so like a multi-component analysis or multi-component project where you will have different pieces for different audiences. So first, we want to have, we suggest that we should have open output as in the sense that as opposed to producing multiple outputs, the analyst should be in charge of identifying what is the best representation of reality or of the facts at any given time. And they should not be saying, it depends in this setting, depends in that setting. When a policymaker is asking you, given this setting, what is the best representation of costs and benefits of a specific policy, there should be one answer. You should not be providing 5 different tables or graphs for policymakers to consciously or unconsciously cherry pick what's the best cost and benefit that fits their beliefs. But at the same time, we think that we should propose one figure, but that figure should be clearly connected to all its assumptions. So put a lot of effort into talking with policymakers, identify what's that figure, but at the same time, make a clear connection on how that figure or that table might change when you change the underlying assumptions. The second layer, which is open analysis, is basically the good old report, but with an arbitrary level of detail, in the sense that you're going to have the narrative, but add more equations when possible to remove ambiguities, and add the code also to remove further ambiguity. So you can see the narrative, the equations, and also the code. And finally, the open materials principle, where you will have all the materials. This is the analogous of computational reproducibility, where you have all the materials in one place for people to reproduce with minimal effort. So we applied this framework to deworming. The contributions we did specifically to deworming, one that was that we did this work of partnering with a key policy partner, Evidence Action in this case, to identify what is the best way to represent cost and benefits, what are the key costs, what are the key benefits from the perspective of a policymaker. And also we connect that final output to all its underlying assumptions. We added documentation to the previous policy analysis to make it more reproducible. There were details that were missing that you would have not been able to reproduce if not documented. And also we created a public repository with all the materials to achieve one-click reproducibility. And how does this look in practice? So first, let's go over open output. This is the final output out here. Basically, we created an interactive tool where people can see the one final result. This will be the net present value of costs and benefits of deworming. But you could dig in deeper and modify the parameters and see how it changes. So if I think I put the link to the slide so you can click on all this thing. But if you click in here, it's going to take you to This is the open output component that basically has the main policy estimate. Here's just a short description of the results. And this is the final policy estimate. These are the assumptions. You can change the costs. You can change the prevalence. I don't know, 0.7, 0.7. Update the plot and see how the results change in real time. You can also dig deeper and look at all the assumptions. And here this will be sort of like a high-level equation that describes all the pieces that go into a analysis. You can also go into the worm wars where people were debating as to what's the true effect of these things, and you can sort of like narrow down debates in a sense that somebody can say, this is not 79.51, this might be 15.34. Update the plot, and you can say, okay, maybe you and I disagree on what's the best estimate, but we can pin it down to this parameter, and that's it. So that I think that fixes the divergence, and it helps to build this type of adversarial collaborations or figure out disagreements. So that's the first layer with the two tabs.
Fernando, we have a quick question. Sorry to interrupt. Hanky is asking, does the tool, did you store all the information in the tool, or do you let the tool present the number and do live calculation?
Yeah. So that comes. The tool will have can show you several scenarios. Sorry, can show you several scenarios and do some of the computation up there. Where do you go? We're here. But if you want to dig deeper, you will have to look into the documentation, and that would be the second layer. So second layer would be the open analysis, where you would have a report, which will be this one. This is a report that produces this figure. This is not interactive, this is just a static figure, but it's the same starting estimate as with the interactive tool. And all the documentation that explains this figure, it's here. And it's basically, this is a report that is extensive, that has the narrative, that we try to layer it up. So basically have a part that's mainly narrative, but if you want to dig into the details, you will click for the equations and you will see the equation there. If you want to see the more detail, you will see that there's the code that implements those equations. That's what we mean by open analysis. And then when you move to the last layer, which is all the materials, this is nothing but a repository that we were just talking in the previous workshop. That it's here. This is a repository that's public, that anybody can fork. You can clone it into your computer, and the idea is that, and I would ask you to do this. If you have RStudio installed, you can download it. You don't even have to clone it or do any if you forgot anything we talk, you can just download it as zip. And the idea is that with minimal effort, you should be able to identify the key files to run. You will run them and you will obtain exactly this and this. So that's how you would be able to modify everything. So let me check. So we try to make it one-click reproducible, in the sense that I would click a few times and get the file to run. We added extensive README files to explain users of how to execute and modify the different things here. We added a clear folder structure. We use version control. The data we use, it's open. Another thing I wanted to highlight, that I think we're trying to do this more also in our research projects. In the repo, we try to use this thing called the credit taxonomy, where there has been so much people who has been working on this project, a lot of undergrads that stay with us for like one semester and then they leave. but we just try to emphasize for the different tasks who led them, who support them, and who co-led them, such that we can identify contributions in a transparent way too. We learn a ton of things from this, and we're coming out with a paper basically explaining all the lessons from this. But one important lesson that I think is important to emphasize is that this thing takes a lot of work. It's basically the cost. It could be similar to like writing a paper, and doing this. Basically, not all policy analysis justify this level of effort, but we do think that there are some characteristics of policy analysis that might justify some OPAs. Topics where there's a lot of disagreement on the facts and there's strong divergence. Other characteristics could be reports that are recurrent. So the development banks, for example, do this ex-ante economic analysis when they're going to give loans, and like the ex-ante economic analysis of building a bridge in country X is similar to the one of building a bridge in country Y, but these things typically end up being like a analysis that it's outsourced and reinvented for every setting. Another context could be when there could be large expected welfare effects. So like a large tax reform, what goes behind the social cost of carbon and things like that. But another thing is that we think as more OPA projects are generated, templates of OPAs will emerge, and this will reduce the costs of creating a new one in the future. Additional benefits of OPA are that it's easy to update and reuse. So our partners, actually, Alliance Action, were just telling us that they were adapting the interactive app to now present these results to the Ministry of Health in Pakistan. So they can change this fairly easy. It's much easier to see a clear connection between the evidence that's generated from research and what goes into the policy analysis, because literally you can see this is the parameter that comes from research, right? And so that, I think that's exciting. It connects much more clearly this black box of policy analysis with research. And there could be, I think I see an exciting connection with forecasting. There's these developments that started in psychology and political science that have moved into economics, where experts are asked to predict the results of studies before they're executed. The policy analysis has a lot of guesstimation. There are a lot of parameters. You don't know what the take-up rate of any given country is going to be. You don't know what the duration of the treatment is going to be, whatever it is, and you have to guesstimate it, and that has been looked with certain contempt, I would say. And I think we should be very clear that policy analysts need to guesstimate, because by definition they're not going to have all the pieces there to provide an answer. But it could be connected in a much more transparent way with these forecasting platforms, like what De La Viña, Pope, and Vivalt have come up with, to ask experts in any given policy analysis field to provide their expert guess on what a parameter is to fill in to an analysis. And I think that's it.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Fernando, very much. Unfortunately, we're at time, so we don't really have time for any questions. Actually, here, there's a question from Hanki. Maybe you could address it quickly. What's the difference between OPA and any automated generated report system for surveys?
Yeah, so the automated report would be here something like the open analysis, the middle layer, in the sense that you are generating the analysis in a somewhat automatic way. So the open analysis would be very similar to a automated report, as long as it's clear what's going on at each stage. The two other components would be this emphasis on working towards identifying a output to inform key policymakers, and and also posting and basically putting a lot of work to building these open materials that are easy for anybody to reproduce with minimal effort.
Okay, thank you. So in case people want to learn more, I pasted a link to the Open Policy Analysis page on our website. There you can learn more about the OP and then also find all of the projects that Fernando has been working on so far, including this one. And yeah, thanks again, Fernando, for presenting OPA.
Thank
Before we